Okay, so I'll not go over the first couple of slides. You obviously heard me introducing the talk. Thanks, Mike, for sorting out that technical issue. It wouldn't be a tech talk without some technical issues. So, into the first slide then about developers being able to design. So, as a developer, you can unlock the creative right side of your brain to enhance your design skills in mobile app development. With mobile apps, we have very specific design traits to think about to ensure that the user is satisfied throughout their user experience. So UI and UX, everyone knows about UI and UX, or on the slides, UX and UI. UX is obviously the user experience. It includes things like functionality, usability, interactivity, and more. UI is obviously the user interface. It's everything visual. So everything like color, layouts, text, etc. As a developer, we can control both aspects of these. We can control the UI and the UX to enhance our apps through good use of mobile-specific design. As a developer myself, I like to simplify all of this into two simple words. We can simplify it by thinking of these as the look and the feel of our mobile apps. The look being the visual side, the look being the user interface. And just to remind yourself, how does this look to the user? Or how will this look to the user? And obviously then the feel being the user experience part of the design. And reminding to ask yourself, how will this make the user feel? Or how will this particular part of my app make the user feel? So I've categorized these on screen here using different attributes. You can see that a few of them cross over between the look and the feel. For example, animations. The animations can obviously look really nice for the user interface part of the design, but it can also make the user experience a lot better if used correctly. So the next slide, I'm just going to give you some design pointers here. So there are a few design pointers that we can keep in mind when developing and designing our mobile apps as a developer. One of the main ones is reducing the cognitive load. The brain the brain has limited processing power, just like computers, especially on smaller screens like your mobile devices. We too can run out of memory when we're presented with lots of information to process on a tiny screen. We can simplify our user interface by making it less intrusive to the user and choosing more simple layouts, using less inputs, using less buttons and less text on the screen. You should also aim to declutter the screen as well. Clarity is one of the most important characteristics of mobile apps, but clutter is clarity's worst enemy. So aiming to prevent a cluttered screen and getting rid of messy elements, walls of text, and lots of inputs. So on the next few slides, I'm going to give you some examples also with app screenshots, which I have built using the Ionic framework alone and using some custom CSS. The source code and more information about each app is available on the Ionic React Hub. However, anytime you see a blue QR code in the top right corner, feel free to scan it with your phone if you're able to, and it'll open up a live web app version of the app in the screenshot. So first off, we have color palette. Being consistent with a chosen range of colors will really help a user become familiar with your app. This is very, very important. If the user feels familiar with the user interface, not only will it reduce the cognitive load on the brain due to knowing what the certain colors mean inside the app, but they'll feel like they are in control of their own app experience. Colors also help to distinguish your app or your company brand and theme. And this can relate to in-app colors or other colors like your app icon. I want you to take a second here and think about what color comes to your mind when you think about a popular app like Facebook, for example. Without much thought, the color will probably pop into your head. Put a message into the chat with the color you come up with, and I guess everyone will probably get the same color. And the reason for this is because that you're familiar with these types of apps. Popular apps like Facebook, like WhatsApp and Snapchat and all of those types of apps, you are a familiar user of that app. And a big thing on this aspect is because of the color. Next up is empty state. So empty state or blank screens can appear as a result of large amounts of data being fetched from a server, or a complex UI being rendered, or things that aren't optimized correctly, like images. We can combat this interruption to our app, and instead of leaving the user feeling uncertain about what is going on, you could provide a loading indicator in the form of a spinner and text, or even better, you could provide a skeleton outline of what the content is actually going to look like once it's ready. So take a look at this example here. It's sort of like a profile, Facebooky style app. At the top, we have like a cover image and an avatar, and then something that could represent profile information. Then at the bottom, we have 3 items, which is holding an image and some text content. So on the bottom, in the second example on the screenshot, you can see that we can clearly see that the text will have certain widths. So the first one there will be a little bit longer than the second one, and the last one will be a bit longer than the previous one. So being able to show the user what width or shape or size each element on the screen is going to be if you need to use something like this is really, really, really good. So some of the benefits is that it informs the user that something is loading, something is happening in your app, and the user knows to wait. It keeps the user intrigued and focused, and it also prevents or reduces the layout shift in your user interface. And then I've just got a code snippet there using Ionic React of the Ion skeleton text and how we can achieve that little item at the bottom with the 3 bits of text. So next up, flat or rounded. So this is a pretty big thing when it comes to deciding on the style of certain elements, like buttons, cards, inputs, and images. You should aim to be consistent throughout your whole app and stick to the same sort of border radius or style of container type elements. And in Ionic, most will be round by default. For example, a square or a flat image won't look as nice inside a rounded card as a round image. And take this as an example. Imagine that we were going from screen 1, which was completely flat or squared style, flat buttons, flat inputs, flat images, etc. And then if the user navigates to screen 2 and everything becomes round, this is going to cost some processing power on your user's brain, therefore increasing that cognitive load as they need to readapt to the shift in visuals and design. And we really want to avoid this. Forms and validation. So it's obviously always a good idea to validate your forms. And this includes a few different things that can happen. You'll need to validate required fields. So for example, if an email is required, then this would show an error if it has been left blank. But also if it doesn't validate as a proper email address format. There are also different ways to validate a form, especially in a mobile app experience. You can dynamically validate while the user types. You can validate as the user touches away, or you can validate upon a request like a button click. It's personal preference in deciding which way to validate. However, you have to be very conscious of where your validation text or your validation hints appear on the screen on a mobile app. They should be relative to the input or the element that it is referring to. Imagine this. Imagine if all of the error messages for this particular app appeared at the bottom of the screen. The user would have to shift their focus to the bottom, read the error messages, shift their focus back to the inputs, and then manually match up the error message to the input. I'm sure you will agree that this could get very frustrating. Keyboard type. So this is a crucial point, especially in mobile apps. Providing the correct keyboard will really help eliminate extra steps that the user needs to take. Look at this example on the screen. So on the top left example, I have a keyboard type of text, but you'll notice that on both examples, the input that the user is expected to put in is their phone number based on the placeholding text. Taking the first example, the user will have to take an extra step to get to the numeric keyboard. And even when they get to the numeric keyboard, it will be displayed on a row. And it's not a good UI for entering a phone number. In comparison, look at the second example where I've provided an input mode and a type of tel. And this allows the keyboard to pop up with the numeric telephone keyboard. Happy user. There's also a code snippet there of the Ion input, which takes in some props of input mode and type, quite like the HTML5 input. But providing the correct keyboard type for user input is really crucial. Visual color aid. So this is a really cool one. Sometimes it's just not enough to display text or content, even if its purpose and meaning are clear. With mobile apps, we can quickly glance at something, and it can be hard to process what it means. Try to use some color relative to the content to further aid what it is you're actually displaying. Take a look at the example on the screen here. So this is a sort of like a banking app or a mobile banking app. And at the top, we have a card. At the bottom, we have a transaction list. So the transaction list is where I want you to focus on. You can see the green and red. This is probably familiar to a lot of people who use mobile banking. But green, representing success or good or go, immediately tells your brain that this is a good thing. This is money into your account. Accompanied by the plus sign, we can clearly see and process that quickly that it is actually a deposit. And in comparison to that, the red text as well that represents a withdrawal, money coming out of the account, which is obviously never good. So informative action. When a user performs an action like a button click or performs a specific event, it's a really good idea to show some informative action where necessary. This can be in the form of animation or other visual representation to show its effect. We could also utilize some haptic feedback to make the touch interaction feel more realistic with a vibration. And this is pretty good practice to do throughout your mobile app where necessary. Keep in mind though, and just to make sure that it doesn't obstruct the user's experience and the view. So on this example here, you can see it's an Instagram app, and this is built completely in Ionic as well as all of the other ones. But this is a really good example of the heart button on Instagram. So whenever you click the heart or whenever you double tap an image, a massive heart will appear and it will fade in and it will fade out. The thing to note here though is that it fades in and fades out on top of the photo that you are interacting with. So the micro interaction or the animation doesn't appear at the bottom of the screen or the bottom right. It appears directly where the user interacts with. And this is very important because if you think about if you're scrolling through Instagram and you're liking photos and this heart appears at the bottom, it's going to obstruct your view and really create a bad user experience. Next, this may seem really, really simple, but input placeholders, these are a massive win for us as developers. And it's a really good idea to provide placeholding text inside your inputs. We sometimes forget how powerful placeholding text can be, especially on a mobile experience where we have limited space. Placeholders can be used to show what value should be or could be entered into the input, such as a search input. It can be like a helper text for the user, and sometimes it's good to experiment with human-like phrases. Hinting to the user with an example of search criteria can not only reduce the cognitive load and skip that step of wondering what do I need to type in here and what is going to happen, but the user will already know what to type in and maybe even know what to expect back in the results. This will help make the user feel like they are in control, promoting a good user experience. So this slide is all about being creative with existing UI components. Sometimes we actually don't even need to reach out for third-party plugins or packages to achieve a complex design. On the left here, you'll see that we have a sort of typical onboarding flow of screens for an app before we get to something like the register or the login page. And this is using the Ion slides and the Ion slide components. On the right side, we have some more complex sort of apps, but they're using the same UI components of Ion slides. We can achieve more complex functionality by harnessing the swipe that is already included in this component and housing different screens relative to each other in the slides. For example, on the left here, if I click play, you'll see that this is a project Kanban board, and I'm able to swipe through the to-do, the in progress, and the done screens within the Ion slides. Compare that to the left side of simple onboarding screens, but it's using the exact same component, the Ion slides. So being creative with your components that already exist is a really, really good thing. On the right side is the mobile banking app, which we saw a few slides ago as well. And if I click play on this, you can see that each card and related transactions are actually housed in their own slide, and you can swipe between each of them. So again, compare that with the simple sort of onboarding slides on the left, compared to a more complex design and complex app that is using the exact same Ion slides functionality. So the Ionic framework has over 100 UI components. You can find all of these in the documentation. And really, as a developer, it's all about just getting more creative with components that already exist before just jumping and reaching out for some sort of package or plugin on the web ecosystem. Sometimes the functionality will already exist within existing components that you can harness. So that's my talk. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to my talk. Sorry for the technical difficulty at the start, but it's been a real honor here to share some tips and tricks with you. I've really enjoyed giving my talk. Now I'm going to sit back and enjoy the rest of the speakers because there's a lot of awesome people speaking at this event. I hope that these design tips and tricks will help you as a developer become better at design, feel more confident in providing effective user interface and user experience, and ultimately help you to open up that creative side of your brain, because we all have it. Not just designers design and not just developers develop. And it's really getting to that point where, as a developer, you can take these pointers on board and take these tips and really think about the look and the feel of your app whenever you're developing. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Remember, you can find me on Twitter at 93Alan. I would love to connect with you. And yeah, thanks very much. Over to Mike again.